Hello, welcome back to the channel, and let's talk about pensions. My opinion when it comes to pensions. Well, pensions were set up in a way that a employee or a person can contribute in a pot for decades, and hopefully by the time they reach the legal age when they can retire, they won't have to depend on the system. They don't have to depend on family members, because they would have a source of income, which is good in theory, you know. But today I'll tell you why I don't really believe in pension schemes, and the reasons why I don't. I've worked for most of my adult life. I worked in the UK, and in the UK, if you work for a company, they will have pretty good pension schemes. Not only you get a state pension, but you can contribute. And you can also have a private pension. And sometimes, most of the times, to be honest, the employer also matches whatever you contribute on a monthly basis, so you can have even more money added to that pot. The reasons why I don't like pensions is the fact that, well, you're gonna put money into a pot for decades. You have to be, as of today, this one, you know, it's not the same in every country, but you have to be in your 65, maybe 67, depending where you live, before you even have access or you start receiving pension. So you depend totally on a system. Money goes somewhere for decades before you even get access to it. And retirement age tends to go up. When I was a kid, I think it was about 60 years or 62 years old. I think now it's about 65. It might change a little bit. It's not in every country the same, but in most countries it's basically kind of in the same range of age when you retire. So that age goes up. So I knew of someone who was supposed to retire, and they were 60, and then the age was 62, and then they increased it to 64, and that person basically retired, I think it was 65. So they had to work another 5 years just to get access to pension. Not only that, but it's also very dependable on population, meaning you need to have young people coming up, working, paying taxes, contributing to that system in order for that system to keep on moving. If you don't have people coming, new young people coming, then you have a problem, because you're not going to have enough money to pay people's pension who have contributed decades of their own money. And in situations like that, a pension scheme may fail. Now, let me give you more reasons why not. So, you know, I'm Romanian. So from a Romanian's perspective, I'll tell you how can this situation be even worse. Well, like I said, UK, Western country, has democracy for generations. Institutions have a lot more, well, they have a better reputation. Let's just say that they have a better reputation because the rule of law and so on have been in place for a very long time. Well, in Eastern Europe, or it used to be Eastern Europe, according to the Warsaw Pact after the Second World War, where I'm originally from, Romania, well, that's not really the case. And democracy has been a thing for about a generation. 1989, if you want to be completely exactly, but I'll be really, really serious when I say probably those institutions, democratic institutions, have been in place properly after 2004, because we still had people in charge of this country that were communists. So the institutions are a lot younger. They don't have a very good reputation. The people who used to and still live in these countries, in former communist countries, people tend to have a low trust in institutions. I mean, they have low trust of government, they have low trust of the police, they have a low trust of banks. And I know this is also happening in the West, right? I'm sure if you ask people from France or Great Britain, the UK, that someone will say, yeah, I don't trust them either. Well, in Eastern Europe, it's a level higher because of historical reasons. Because we didn't have democracy for that long. And basically the mentality was that everybody's trying to get you, basically, one way or the other. And I'll get to the point fast. Why? How is this related? How is this related to pensions? Well, if you are like someone who grew up during communism in Romania, you worked your whole life and you retired, or you retired very soon after communism because the government changed, because the way you rule the country changed, right? It went from dictatorship to democracy. I'll just say this, those pensions, those years that they worked during communism, they do not translate very well to our society. So whatever they get paid up by the government, it's almost, I mean, it's laughable. It's a laughable amount of money. I'll give you an example. My grandfather, when he was alive, he would get 3 pensions, right? So he worked his entire life and he retired during the communist era. So he got that pension from the communist. He got a state pensions when Romania flipped from dictatorship to democracy. And he was also getting a pension from as a veteran of the Second World War. Well, all of those 3 pensions amounted to peanuts. Peanuts. And he was lucky that, you know, he was basically living in the countryside and he had animals and land and whatever. And it was a lot more independent when it comes to food and all that. You know, but some people are not that lucky. My point is, if you worked all your life in a system and you paid up into it and you retire and then that system changes, the form of the government changes, it's possible that you're gonna be basically screwed over when it comes to pensions. And a lot of people are like that. Most of the people who retire during that age, if they're still alive, or they retired very soon after, they got very, very low pensions. I don't know how they live on the amount of money they are getting. That's why I was talking about low trust society. One of the reasons why in Eastern Europe, in my opinion, is still a low trust society. Now, on the other hand, if you buy Bitcoin and you own your own keys, right? Always own your own keys. Have your seed somewhere written down, or remember it. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin and all of that. If you own and all that money that you contributed for decades into a pot and you invest that money by yourself, it's very likely you'll be a lot better off in the long run. And I'll give you an example, because I started contributing and DCAing, dollar cost averaging in buying Bitcoin many years ago. I was working and living in the UK, and I remember I think this was a new job, and they asked me, do you want to contribute towards your pension? And I said no. And they asked me, well, why not? I said, well, I don't want to. I mean, I know there's a minimum which is legally required, if I remember correctly. I'm not entirely sure, but the private pension was optional. And they asked me, you don't want one? You don't want to contribute towards your private pension? And I said, no, I don't. And it was about, I can't remember exactly, I think it was about 40 to 50 pounds. And I think it was like, this was like maybe 2018. I think it was 2018, maybe 2019. Anyway, they were so shocked when I said no. There was a meeting, and I was invited to a meeting with the highest manager on that site and a member of the HR department, because they said they legally have to enroll me into that pension scheme because they are required by law. And we had a meeting, and they were asking me, they were like a bit concerned, why don't you want to contribute towards your pension? And I said, I can invest that money by myself, and I'm pretty sure I'll do a better job than the pension scheme. And yeah, they were a bit taken aback by that. They couldn't believe what I said. And like I said, they had to legally enroll me into the pension scheme, and then I had to contact that whoever was the provider, and I had to tell them I do not want to be part of that pension scheme. And that was the only way I could get around it. And I remember I had to do this every 2 years, because every 2 years they will enroll you automatically again, because it was required by law. And every 2 years I had to go to this process, a meeting with the HR department, and then I had to call the provider of the pension to tell them I do not wish to contribute to a pension scheme. I have to say that I'm very happy I did that, because I don't want to be dependent on the system. I don't want to put money into a pot for decades, and when you get to your old age, something happens, something changes, something unpredictable, a war breaks out, or you never know what happens, and your pension doesn't exist anymore, and you have contributed a lot of money throughout the years and you get nothing. And I think that happens to a lot of people. Never happened in the UK, because geographically it's been a country that has changed, you know, slowly over time. Never had any proper revolutions or wars in the last couple of hundred years. I mean, in mainland UK, but in other places. Alan from the future here. So my point with that statement was that the UK was the only exception where things evolved peacefully over time, and there was no revolution, no war required, especially in the last 200 years or so. Everywhere else, on continental Europe especially, each time a change like that had to happen, it almost always was through a revolution, through war. People had to, you know, they had to rise up against the government and fight to get some kind of reform, to get some freedoms from the governments, to improve their quality of life and so on. They had to fight for it, with obviously loss of lives. That was my point in that statement. Now let's get back to the video. You never know. A revolution comes, government type changes, the government becomes tyrannical, you never know what happens. And you're literally dependent on that system when you're getting old. It's not like you're young and you lost a bunch of money. Yeah, you can still work and make it back. But when you're old and you're not in a position to work anymore and you lost your pension, I don't even want to imagine. That's why I don't want to be dependent on the system. That's why I chose to dollar cost average in Bitcoin. And another thing with the population, it's also possible, like I previously mentioned, that a scheme will fail, right? There is population decline everywhere in the civilized world, so who knows? And also the legal age when you can retire keeps going up. I'm sure if you're like 40 and younger and you have another 20 something years until you retire, I wouldn't be surprised that the retirement age will be in the 70s when you get to that age. Those are the reasons I don't like pension schemes. I have a certain amount of Bitcoin that it's there as my pension that I will never sell. And I think that's gonna be a lot better. And I'm actually very happy that I made that decision years ago, because, you know, prices of Bitcoin are just going higher and higher every year. Yeah, we have bear markets once every 4 years, but if you look at the trend in the last 10 years or so, it's clear what's the best investment out there. Let me see, I don't think I forgot anything. So as a summary, the reason why I don't like pension schemes, I don't like to be dependent on a system. I like to manage my own money. I want to have access to that pot whenever I want. If I want to make a decision and change something in my portfolio, not to be locked out for decades. I don't like that idea a lot. Obviously that money is not going to stay there. They're going to move it around. They're going to try to invest it themselves. And I just think it's not financial advice. Obviously you do what you want, but I just think it's going to be a lot better in the long run if I have some Bitcoin as my retirement, as my pension, And of course, you can still contribute, you can still buy. You're still young, you can still work. You can still keep buying and keep putting to that pot and that portfolio. So you are sure that when you get to that age, you won't have any problems. But let me know about your opinion. I'm curious, what do you guys think about pensions? Do you believe in it? Do you have one? Do you prefer Bitcoin? Which one is it? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.